Thank you. I can't tell you how many times I've walked across this campus, and when we were faculty members walking from there over to the old Frontenac's Church School, and it's just really wonderful to be back. I'm trying to feel grateful even though the heat is here and the fans do make a huge difference. Thank you, Jan. So why do we need something about forgiveness? Let me give you a few vignettes of things that happen in our lives that make us think about forgiveness and how we need to forgive. How do we forgive when you have someone come to your church who says, hey, I'm going to get involved in flipping houses. And if you'll go in with us, we'll be able to flip houses, and then you'll have a huge profit. And they give, and then pretty soon this person says, well, it didn't work out, and you're out thousands and thousands of dollars. But you know they're going to another church to do the same thing. How do you forgive, and does forgiveness mean you don't do anything about it? We have forgiveness issues in our congregations between people. We have forgiveness issues in society, which we're dismally failing at the moment. We have forgiveness in our families, in our personal relationships. And here's one. Why is forgiveness important? I was in another state, which will be unnamed, and someone said, you need to go to this one church. It's so friendly. And I was new. I knew not one soul in the entire place, so I went. And as I walked into I said to the woman at the front door with the bulletins, I said, now, where do the Sabbath school classes meet? She goes, well, it's all in your bulletin. Okay. And I thought, well, it's obvious, but okay. So I looked around, and I sat myself down inside, and I turned, and I went to make eye contact with someone next to me, and she turned her head away. And I thought, something not right about my clothes. Am I not dressed conservatively enough for this particular church? And the deacon came down the aisle with a plate. And I put my money in the plate, and I looked right up in his face, and he looked away, and I thought, well, that beats everything. And at the end, I couldn't get anyone to greet or say hello, and I thought, wow, something's really going on here. Is this one of those churches where they send people to write about it in the review? Do you remember that? Churches you never want to visit or something like that? And I thought, is that what this is? But I thought, just like it is when you go on a first date, they might be nervous, so you give them another chance and you go again. So I went back to the church. And it was worse, if you can imagine. I went to another church. I was asked to get out of her husband's seat. Yes, I see those eyes. I wanted to do that. It's like, are you serious? Now, what had happened, I didn't learn why that church was not doing its job as an embracing body of Christ. I learned that later. The reason was because the pastor had recently left with the secretary, and no one knew where they were. And everyone had taken sides, and everyone was shocked and focused on what had happened. Do we forgive? Do we not? Do we disfellowship? Where are they? What does this mean? And they completely ignored the needs of people walking in the door. So I tell you that story because I don't think that we can allow things around us to determine the way we behave if we're going to be sharing the heart of Christ. Do you think? Now, I'm going to start each of our talks with a very short video that demonstrates some aspect of forgiveness, and I want you to listen to these with an open mind. Some of these are from people from very different religious traditions than we have. But Jesus said, other sheep I have that are not of this fold, didn't he? And his Holy Spirit acts on everybody to be able to make things happen in a way that he would will it to happen. So we'll see if I can have this work.
We're in Lexington, Kentucky, and the sentencing of Trey Alexander Relford. He's pled guilty to the 2015 murder and robbery of Salahuddin Jitmud, a 22-year-old who'd been delivering pizzas. Jitmud was making his final delivery of the night when Relford and two accomplices lured him into their apartment complex, then robbed and stabbed him to death.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Before Relford receives his sentence, the victim's father, Sombat Jitmud, a school principal and devout Muslim, speaks directly to the man who murdered his son.
Trey Alexander Relford, I feel so sad for you that you have to be in this situation. I wish I could help you as I help my son to be a good citizen. If Salahuddin were to be here, if he alive, he would forgive you. That's the way he was. That's the way he is. I'm not angry at you for being part of hurting my son. I'm angry at the devil. I blame the devil who misguiding you and misleading you to do such a horrible crime. No, I don't blame you. I'm not angry at you at all. I want you to know that. I forgive you on behalf of Salahuddin and his mother.
Thank you.
Before Judge Kimberly Bennell delivered her sentence, there was still one person left to speak.
Mr. Relford, do you wish to make a statement?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry about what happened that day. But I do applaud you, because it takes a powerful man to know that somebody has hurt them and do what you, get up there and say what you just said. I have a child. She's 4. And I can imagine the hurt, the pain from losing her. Just tell us what I can do. So when I thank you for your forgiveness.
And now it's time for the judge to announce her sentence.
Mr. Relford, an incredibly horrible event happened that has changed the lives of 2 families forever. Nothing can fix it. I am going to accept the Commonwealth's recommendation. Murder, 25 years. And I truly wish for you the very best. Thank you.
What do you think of that? There are people around the world that know how to forgive in ways that we might not. It's not that simple. We're going to talk today about what our mouth says and what our heart says, because they're not always the same thing, are they? How many of you have extended forgiveness to someone and then later you're so upset you can't sleep and your guts churn and you're furious? Oh, am I the only one who has said the words and then I was still bothered by it? You're a shy group, because I know most of us do that. So I want to talk today about forgiveness and why this is such an important thing for us to talk about. I'm going to turn this way just a little bit so I don't have to have my back to you. I've got a screen here with my slides on it so I can see. So these are the things that we have heard about forgiveness. We better do it, because if we don't do it, then what will happen is we will not be forgiven. we hear these things. It scares us because we know that we're limited in what we can say the words, but we might not have those feelings for a long time. If we're converted and we can't forgive, there's proof that we're not converted. How many of you have heard that one? If you're abused by someone and you don't turn around and immediately forgive them, then you're not a fine Christian. We're going to talk quite a bit about that on Thursday, because that is a very, very critical issue we need to address. We should emulate Christ. We shouldn't get angry when we're grieved by others. So we hear a lot of messages. I know when I was young, my brother put up some of the bullies in the back of the school bus to irritate me as they got off the bus. Now, younger brothers are known for doing these things to their older sisters, right? Thank you. I'm just making sure you're awake. And so he had this older student come by and pat me on the back of the head and kiss my cheek. Well, when you're 12 years old, that's the height of indignity. And when we got off the school bus that afternoon and we started walking to the house, he was about an arm's length away, very wisely. And as soon as the bus was out of sight, I took out after him, chased him up the stairs, grabbed him by the shirt, and I was going to just let him have it. But then I said, well, I can't hurt you because I love you. And you make me so mad. Don't do that again. And that night, we were laying in our rooms across the hall from one another, and I said to him, Gerald, would you forgive me for everything I've ever done? That's pretty broad. And he paused. Yeah. It's interesting. We feel like if we get the slate clean and we say the right words, then everything is okay, but that's not always the case. I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the research. Now, I'm a teacher, and I lecture to medical students, and they want to know verse and author and everything so they know that it's reliable. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have a lot of slides with a lot of things on it. You can take notes on your handouts page, but I think I captured most of the things on your handout page, or you can pick up your phone and take a picture of the slide if you want to do that. But what we know is that in the last few years, there has been this burgeoning of research about forgiveness. Now, before that, we were in what is called the modernist era, Dr. Spock, and I don't mean Dr. Spock, this Dr. Spock, I mean Dr. Benjamin Spock, the childhood expert who said, don't ever let the children go in your bedroom, keep them in their own bed. They had all these rules that were based on science. Never, but never talk about God in the therapy room or the medical room. And then what happened is in South America, it was noticed that some of the people that came in for therapeutic services were having symptoms that could not be accounted for by any physical or mental reason. And they realized that actually what was happening was some kind of a spiritual issue for them. And they brought in their faith leaders who had an intervention with them, with the therapist, and they began to write about how important it is to pay attention to spiritual issues. This is the beginning of the postmodern era. Postmodernism gets a really bad rap because we think, oh, it means there's no God, it means there's no right, there's no wrong. But what it also means, that's on one extreme end of it, but on the other end of it, it's, wait a minute, there are many things that make us do what we do, and some of those are religious beliefs. Let's pay attention to the religious beliefs. And so when that was stated, there was this huge amount of research about forgiveness and why we do it and can we do it and what happens if we do it. Now, what they found is that we're hardwired for revenge. We want to have things the way we want them. Now, Benjamin Franklin's picture is up here because most of us wish we could be as witty as he was. But there was a time he went to a dinner party and he drank too much of the alcoholic punch and he got very tipsy. And as he was leaving, the lady of the house was incensed and she drew herself up at the door and she said, "Sir, you are drunk." And he looked at her and he said, "I am drunk. but you are ugly, and tomorrow I will be sober. And most of us wish we had that kind of wit, just to come back and let people have it. That's how we're wired, and he was very, very good at these witty kind of pushbacks. Most of us are not. Most of us lay awake later and say, I wish I could have said that. Why didn't I think of this? How do they think they could get away with that? So we are wired for revenge. That is our natural state, unfortunately. These researchers here are people that were mentioned this morning. Robert Enright on the end, Everett Worthington. I want to say something about both of these men. Robert Enright spent quite a bit of time in Northern Ireland during the difficult days, where there were Catholic and Protestant fighting and murders. And he was able to bring a forgiveness curriculum to the school children, which started trickling down into the families and making an enormous difference. Everett Worthington, on the other hand, was a researcher about forgiveness. His own mother was murdered halfway through his research on forgiveness, which that gives you a huge personal impact when you think about forgiveness. Fred Luskin is at Stanford. We talked about Dick Tibbetts. Lourdes Morales Goodmanson used to be at AUC and is now at La Sierra University and teaches a class on forgiveness. She's written extensively about forgiveness as well. So people of all faiths, incidentally, Fred Luskin, if you get Fred Luskin's book, let me say a word about that. I listened to him, I've spoken to him many times, and I was listening to his presentation one time for some continuing education. And afterward I said, Fred, how do you label yourself religiously? And he said, well, I'm an agnostic Jew. And I said, that's interesting because the language you're using could be used in any religious group. He goes, that's why I frame things the way I do. Because if I were to come in here and talk about forgiveness from a Judaism standpoint, I would be rejected by Christians. If I came in and talked about Christian forgiveness, then everybody else would. But there are basic principles that apply and that come out of every world religion, and that's what I'm talking about. So if you get that book, there are no mentions of God in it, just so you know, but the principles are sound, and they apply, and they come from every religious background. Now let's talk about some of the types of forgiveness. You didn't know there were so many kinds of forgiveness. Some people will forgive and say, the relational forgiveness, I will reconcile with you and we'll pretend nothing ever happened. That's what most of us think forgiveness is, forgive and forget. That's very dangerous for some people. But I want you to know that this is how people think forgiveness should be, but Scripture does not teach that. Disjunctive forgiveness is where I will forgive you, I will not hold on to the bitterness, I will not hold you accountable for this, but I need to set a boundary and it's not helpful for me to be in your company. And that's different. That's perfectly acceptable. Conditional forgiveness, if you do these, you broke my lawnmower, then you fix it and I'll forgive you. There's that tit for tat. Unconditional, doesn't matter, everything is, whatever it is, I'll forgive you. Whether they're sorry or not. Now, to forgive somebody who has no remorse takes a lot of humility, because someone's got to absorb that pain of that person who did something to you knowing that they were going to hurt you, and you take it in. So it takes a lot of humility to be able to forgive when you're not asked for forgiveness. Decisional forgiveness, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. That's what I call pre-forgiveness. It's what our theology tells us we will forgive. We will forgive those things done to us because that's what Christ asks us to do. That is what Christ's heart is like. That is what salvation is made of. Are you all with me? Now, don't feel I'm going to pass out if you say amen, or if you raise your hand, or if you speak back. I like that because I need to know you're with me. Judicial forgiveness is what we saw just a moment ago when this good young man here got sentenced to 25 years. You saw him soften immediately. When he was given forgiveness, he softened. He started thinking, he didn't have to defend himself, and he began thinking about, I better think about my own daughter. Psychological forgiveness is also called emotional forgiveness. This is very hard to do. It takes a long time. We can say the words. We can say, in principle, I forgive that person. I've got all these feelings that are balled up inside of me because this hurt me. I lost money. They kept me from getting that promotion. They bullied me. All of these things. And unfortunately, we have to deal with those. So I'm going to talk to you about that today. Now, there's something called developmental stage forgiveness. If our baby vomits down our leg in church, we forgive them. Babies do that, right? If our parents need extra help moving around, we forgive that because that is how they are functioning. We understand that. There's a reason. We forgive that. If you've got a teenager who comes home and says, I'm gonna paint my hair green and make a mohawk, you kind of, in your head, you roll your eyes and you think, that is classic teenager talk, and I get that. That will blow over, and I forgive that. If someone leaves crumbs all over the counter, you think, well, I know this person doesn't mop up after themselves. I forgive that. I will say what I can to change that, but I can't control that, so I'm going to forgive that because it's not worth an argument every time. I love this one in the middle here. This little note from a teacher. While I was, this is to the parent, while I was reading to the class, Tanner removed his shoe and sock and began playing with something. It was a dead lizard. I removed the sock. It smelled like dead things. According to Tanner, the lizard went up in the air and was alive when it was in the sandbox, and he stepped on it by accident. We forgive a kid who has a stinky sock with a dead lizard in it. That is developmentally appropriate. How many of you had kids that did things like this? Or how many of you did things like this? You get a June bug and you tie a string around its leg and put the other end on the clothesline, and you watch it go around and go back and forth. That's what kids do. You forgive that. That's expected. I talked about unforgiveness in the church. I think our churches are hotbeds of unforgiveness, and we have to really think, how do I embrace the forgiveness of Christ? Because sharing the heart of Christ isn't just sharing it with them out there. It's with these right here, and it's with those people we go home to every day as well. So some time ago, I got a grant, and when I was at Walla Walla teaching, and we did a study about how Christians forgive. And we went to a number of different Adventist churches. We had a number of people come in. We delivered a curriculum to them about why they're having such difficulty to forgive. Some of that I'm going to share with you today. But what we found out is that there are so many elements that are involved with forgiveness. It's not just a theological decision, that actually our bodies get hijacked when we're upset. How many of you know that's true? Okay. Not only that, but our beliefs get challenged. Our history of who has hurt us in the past gets triggered. How many of us know that? Yes. So if someone has hurt us before and something happens now that's a little bit similar, all of the old stuff comes up. And all of that comes up again, and we think, oh, I thought I'd put that to bed. And apparently there it still is. What about our personality? We know now in psychology that some people are wired so that some people find it more easy to forgive than other people. Some people have a personality that is much more easygoing and forgiving, and some people hang on to a grudge as long as they can because they're not going to let go until they get justice. Some people have a very strong fairness nerve. Do you know people like that? If it sounds like it's unfair, we're not having it, and you're going to hear from me until it's fixed. Who is it that did this offense to you? Was it someone close to you? Do you remember reading in the Psalm? It was you, my familiar friend. We used to go to church together. And that was about David and Jonathan. It was just terrible that this was someone close to him that had done this. Now, if a stranger cuts me off on the highway, I'll kind of think to myself, well, that person's having a bad day, or boy, they better watch it because we're going to see them in the ICU one day. That's what goes through my mind. But if I'm leaving the driveway and my dear sweet husband, who would never do this, if he were to cut me off, I'd get out and say, what is going on here? Why would you do that? What are you angry at me for? And it would be more difficult. There would be more of a comeuppance. It's a good old word my mother and father used to use. There'd be a comeuppance about that. So let's think about what forgiveness is not. We need to demystify this whole thing. Because when you forgive someone, it's not absolving them. It's not saying it doesn't matter that it happened. It's not saying you don't have to pay for anything that happened. It's not in any way saying, I have to be with you at Christmas dinner regardless of what happened to what you did to me. It doesn't mean any of these things. It doesn't mean denying that this really, it was really packed a wallop when it happened. It doesn't mean that you're going to minimize it and you're going to gaslight and say, oh, it's all right. It's not all right. It hurt. It was difficult. It was painful. Forgiveness is very different than those things. What forgiveness is extending grace. We'll put some operational legs under this, as we say. These are some of the meanings of this. Letting go, deciding you're not going to let this corrosive anger rule you, because corrosive anger eats you from the inside out. It's forfeiting your right to get revenge. Remember, we want revenge. It's giving the responsibility to God to deal with the offender. How many of you have read, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God? I certainly have, and God is the one who is the judge. He doesn't make us a judge even when we're harmed by somebody else. And he is more than able to take down people, to deal with them, to give them opportunities to repent, to change. That is not of me to do. Taking responsibility for anything that may have been my part. Now, I've thought back to some of the most painful times of my life, and some of those painful times were times when I was either ignorant of what was going on around me or what was expected, or I just didn't know something, or I wasn't familiar with what was going on, or I hadn't developed to the point where I understood what was expected. And that's where we're going to talk about in the next few days about how to forgive yourself. Any of you want to know how to forgive yourself? Remember how Paul said, I can forgive myself, but even if I forgive myself, there's a God who knows whether or not that is actually effective. It's letting go as though nothing happened to you. Thoughtless forgiveness. What is thoughtless forgiveness? This is where your mouth says very quickly, I forgive you, kind of like kiss your sister, make up. Oh, you slapped her? Go kiss your sister, and it's over. It's not over. We all know that. But that is thoughtless forgiveness. And when we do thoughtless forgiveness, without spending any time trying to understand what happened, what the impact is on us, the challenge of that is we don't really take that in. We don't really digest that. We don't think about the impact on us. We don't actually do anything with it that is helpful. It's like having a mouthful of unchewed food for years. Now, you know that gets nasty. Okay? So we can do all of these things. We get triggered because we haven't dealt with things. We begin obsessing about why did this happen? Why did they do this? I can't believe it. And we make it the center of our conversations. Okay. So forgiveness is all of these things. It's a decision. It's making some kind of outward declaration that I've chosen to forgive. And I think if you want to benefit the most from this workshop this week, I'd like to encourage you to think of one experience or one situation that has hurt you deeply, where you've been harmed by somebody else, because you can just take in facts, but unless you take this and you do it yourself, everybody knows you're just giving advice, but you really don't know what you're talking about, okay? And that's really annoying to listen to. So take it in, apply it to something in your life, and see how it works, because we know that these things work, but they're not overnight. These are not overnight things. It is central to understanding the heart of Jesus. It's central to us understanding and accepting salvation to understand forgiveness, and to extend forgiveness. It's absolutely central to that. So our ability to understand and experience forgiveness is central to the Christian life. I love this statement. If you want to be like Jesus, remember he had a wilderness, a Gethsemane, and a Judas. And I had a friend who said, I want to be like Jesus, but I don't want to get like Jesus. I don't really look forward to a Gethsemane experience. God forbid that I ever have to be in a place where I have to deal with a Judas. Well, some of us have dealt with Judases before. And we know that these things make us stronger, but we have to know how to deal with these. So here's some questions. Do you get preoccupied or obsessed? Do you fixate on the injury? Do you have a well-developed story about what happened to you? Some people do have a well-developed story. I was traveling someplace with someone and I mentioned a name, and she said to me, oh, you know who that is, don't you? That's the person that hurt blah, blah, blah. And a few minutes later I mentioned another, well, you know what happened there, don't you? And this person had held on to grudges unbelievably, a whole lifetime of horrible stories. Well, you know that the thoughts of our minds come from the well springs of our hearts. And if that's what we're cherishing and making central in our lives, a lot of things that come out of our mouths are not going to be uplifting, are not going to be sharing the heart of Christ. They'll just be empty words. So I want to talk about decisional forgiveness. This is something that I'd like you to think particularly about today, because this is hard to do. This is the easy one to do. Emotional forgiveness, that we'll talk about next, is very hard to do. So this is where we say it's a pre-forgiveness. We can all decide. Jesus said to forgive. I will forgive you as you are forgiving others. We know in our theology that Jesus says to forgive other people. We'll talk more about that on Friday, but this is very, very important to us. It's based on your decision to forgive regardless of whether someone said they're sorry, whether they said they apologize, whether they're taking any responsibility, or whether they need to be prosecuted or not for something egregious that they did. It's a decision. I will be like Jesus and forgive those who hurt me. And most of us can do this fairly quickly and fairly easy. I want to be a forgiving person. And if you're unsure about that, do a study sometime later in the day. Get out your concordance, pull up your phone, and do something where you look up forgiveness and forgive. You'll find it over and over and over in Scripture. So this is just the first step. Forgiveness is not just a one and done. It's a process. It is a process. If anyone tells you it's a one and done, I would be very skeptical of that, because one and done means you're still walking around with unchewed food in your mouth. And we know that that's pretty yucky. God expects us to make the decision to forgive people, but he wants us to be able to also work it through so that we can let go of things and have emotional peace. Because just like the church that I went into, if we don't have emotional peace, we cannot reach out to other people. I think this is central to doing our own personal work so that we can reach out to other people. This is going to sound to some of you very trite and very simple. You might want to take a picture of this slide, because these things are very difficult to do. And they don't happen overnight. They happen over days or months, and you revisit and revisit and revisit. You remember Paul, who said, but I am the least of the apostles because I persecuted the church of Christ. And if you read carefully, he sent one person after another to jail. He broke into homes. He sent so many people to their deaths before he was converted. What do you think it was like to live like that and not be able to forgive himself? Do you think he struggled with that sometimes? Any of us who have done things that we deeply regret will at some point think, oh, I wished I hadn't done that. I know Jesus forgave me, and I'm grateful, and I'll keep talking to him about that, thanking him. But in the meantime, I've got consequences to deal with. My kids don't like me. The person at work, those sharp words that I said I should never have said. And now they remember that. That's part of the equation of our relationship. Does that make sense to you? So there are some leftovers that stay with us that we have to decide over and over what we're going to do with. And this is a way to start that. So let me run through this list quickly. It's slow to materialize. It's much less under our direct control. Tomorrow I'm going to give you a model that explains why we can't seem to get that thing out from under our skin. And I think it will make a lot of sense to you based on the way our bodies work and the way our brains work and the fight or flight responses that we get. So it makes logical sense. This is how God made us, and this is one of the little areas we have to say, wait a minute, that's my body doing that to me. I made a decision to forgive, so let me move past that. Replacing revenge, avoidance, and grudge holding with grace, mercy, and agape love. And this is hard too sometimes. It is not something you say, okay, I'm not going to be angry at them anymore for jerking me around at work and making my life a misery. I'm going to think about them in a different way. And I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to extend love and grace to them. That's replacing, but it's also doing some other things as well. So how much of this should you do? We talked about offense by different people. If you were offended by a stranger, you just don't want to be triggered again. If you were run off the road, you don't want to be a nervous Nelly when you get behind the wheel of the car. You've got to do enough to make that happen. You don't have to find out who that person was and send them a card and tell them Jesus loves them. Okay? A family member, how do I achieve a positive attitude toward that person as much as is possible? Didn't Paul say, or maybe it was Peter, as much as is within you, live in peace with all people, right? As is possible. He realized it is not always possible. So as much as possible, live in peace with people, which means we start praying for people. We start thinking about what were some of the things that made this happen. Oh, if it's a criminal, we reduce our reactivity, but then we realize that justice will prevail, and this person will most likely get some kind of a criminal sentence, and they will have to deal with that. But as happened here, this man can move on. The man who forgave his son's murder can move on in a clear conscience, not ruminating about what happened. So how do we do this? These are some things, again, this is a recipe for how we do this. All of these things are not on your handout, so you might want to snap a picture of these if you'd like. But you want to, first of all, stop and think, what actually happened? How deeply was I wounded? What did this cost me? How have I changed since that happened? Now, most of us don't do that. We think, I don't want to go there. I don't want to feel that. I'm just going to move on. That's thoughtless forgiveness. If you say, I'm just going to forgive and move on, you still have a mouthful of unchewed food. Are you with me on that? So we have to stop and face it and say, this thing did happen. I was crushed, or I was disappointed, or I lost faith in the church, or these things happened to me, and this is what I walked away with. Identify how it's affected you emotionally, physically, financially, socially. Crying and being upset is very normal. This is why a lot of people don't do this, because they think, I don't want to feel that way. We're supposed to have joy in the Lord. Yes, and even Jesus cried, and the disciples cried, and everybody alive has cried at some point, because that's how we're wired. When things hurt us, we do, and that's how we heal. We get it, we wash it out. After exploring what happened, avoid finger wagging, raging, feeling reactive, imagining you wish what you could do to get payback, or wondering how you could engineer things to get an apology. You have to let go of it after you grieve what's happened. Imagine the experience, the feelings and motives of the offender, and how they came to the point that they actually occurred that way. So what was it like for that person when they were doing those? What would make someone do that? I was bullied one time for a year at least, and it was horrendous. It broke my spirit. I was devastated. I just did not know how I was going to manage. And later, I gained some insight about that. I forgave those people, but I gained insight later, and I realized a number of those people were desperately unhappy, desperately upset with their lives, and I just happened to be the lightning rod. And it probably, they would have done that to anybody else who was a little lower in stature than they were. And they did it well, let me tell you. So getting that insight helped me say, oh, okay, this was not all about me. There was something going on with them. Consider the pressures, emotional stability, the life experience, and the person who harmed you. Give the results of that person's future and past behavior to God. I'd like to give you an exercise to do. If you think about, you go through these first steps, if you're able to do that, and really take stock of what hurt you. And at some point, what I'd encourage you to do is imagine that you have your hands full of all those terrible feelings and the pain of what happened to you, and that you go someplace quiet, maybe out here on the edge of the property, or after dark you stand outside, and you take this handful of pain and bad feelings, and you hold it up like this, and you say, God, this is your problem. Would you take this from me? Because these are your children too. Take this from me and help me to focus on how you want me to live, and you take over what's going to happen to that person. And let it go. Can you picture that? Now, it doesn't fix everything, but you're able to say, I've done what is reasonable. God is in control. By the way, we need to be doing this for our politicians, whether you like them or you don't like them. They're people that Jesus died for, every single one. This administration and the last one, Jesus would have come for any one of them if they were the only one. So we need to be praying and putting those things up to God and say, God, you are King of Kings and Lord of Lords. There it is. Take that. Would you take that? Pray for the person and their spiritual walk and for their salvation. Many times people who have said things that were a little off or hurtful, I've said, Lord, don't hold them out of the kingdom for that thing. Just deal with them and help me to be able to love full-heartedly, but not to hold that against them. Give up control about what you think, what you can make them think or feel. Don't try to engineer some kind of get-together where maybe you can force them into apologizing. That is not giving up on it. That's holding on. And consider that you've been given grace. How many of you have been forgiven of something pretty unpleasant? Yeah. And do you know what that feels like deep down when you're forgiven? To say, oh, wow. That's what we need to give to other people, whether they accept it or not. That is what we give other people. I talked about grief work. That's a therapy term for going to the depths of what happened and feeling that and understanding it, and then deciding you're going to give that to God. And then explore, how does this fit into your view of God or your worldview? Some people have something called justice theology. If I do good, then only good things will happen to me. Remember Rabbi Kushner's book that was called When Bad Things Happen to Good People? He was reflecting on justice theology, where people will say, well, nothing bad should happen to me because I'm a good person. And we know that that's not true, so we have to challenge our worldview about the fact that nobody has to be gracious to me. There's no rule that says people have to be kind or always speak pleasantly to me. Not everyone's gonna like me, and that's okay. So we have to think about those things. Someone will come along and say, but we're told not to dwell on unpleasantness. This is a little quote from Sister White. She was writing to a man who was acting inappropriately with a young girl, and she said to him, "Dear brother, why? In the last view given, I was shown that you do not understand yourself. You have a work to do for yourself which no one can do for you. Nobody can get into your head and do the work of forgiveness for you." That's what each of us have the opportunity to do. So in closing, I've given you a few things. Did you get a few ideas today that you hadn't thought of before? A few reminders of things you probably already thought and probably already are doing. Forgiveness is a big thing. It takes a long time to mentally and emotionally and socially and relationally digest all of these things that are happening. But I want you to know that there is a way forward. And Jesus invites us to cast all of our cares on him because he does care for us. He has forgiven us not just so that it stops with us, but so that it moves on to other people as well. You can see the topics we're going to be talking about. Some things I'm going to keep referring forward. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about unforgiveness and your mental health. And you will see study after study. I will try not to kill you with studies and statistics, but I am a teacher. But to point out the very rich, abundant evidence that our mental capacity and our emotions are all deeply affected by the inability to forgive. So it behooves us, if we want to think well, especially for older people, as we get older, to be able to think clearly and be able to put the forgiveness issues behind us. So let's see, I think we're going to have questions tomorrow, but it looks like it's time now for our drawing. And I just want to thank our sound team and our video team and the good-hearted people that put these fans here that have kept me standing straight, because my goodness, it's hot here. I didn't want to have you know more about me than you should with me pass out up here. Thank you very much.